Good afternoon. My name is Bill Wolf, and I am very excited to be moderating this panel. This particular webinar is entitled Next Gen Tech: The Role of Technology in Combating Human Trafficking and the Changes Needed to Make It Effective. And I'm so excited about the incredible experts that we have here with us today. This webinar is part of the Freedom Requires Action webinar series, brought to you by the Safe House Project. And this is really about inspiring change, particularly change within the policy realm. So what is it that we need to be doing to be more effective in implementing policies and practices, whether it's at the governmental level or even within the private sector, to be able to effectively combat human trafficking? I think today's topic is of particular interest. We hear more and more about how the bad guys are using technology, but we also see where our law enforcement officers, our NGOs, and other governmental organizations are starting to leverage technology in a positive way. But I can tell you, from coming from government service, having been in the government for over 20 years, government tends to be a little behind the times, right? And technology is evolving at an extremely rapid pace. We've seen just with the onset of AI and the public availability of tools like ChatGPT, how they've started just in over the course of a couple of months, revolutionized how we do business. And of course, that impacts how the traffickers are doing business. And we hope to be able to leverage that so that our law enforcement officers and other folks are more equipped in the field. Before we jump in with our panel, I do just want to quickly acknowledge today, May 15th, is National Peace Officers Day. This is part of Police Week that happens annually here in the United States. It's just an opportunity to recognize and honor those brave women and men who give their lives every day by putting themselves on the front lines, and also to remember those 200 and some police officers that lost their lives this last year in the line of duty. We just want to say thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for putting yourselves out there and protecting our communities. And so we recognize and honor you today. But without further ado, I will jump in with our panel, because you all did not come this afternoon to hear from me, but to hear from them, the true experts in this space. And I want to start with my friend Aaron, who is the founder and chief executive of Anti-Trafficking Intelligence Initiative. Now, this is an incredible organization, really with a unique niche in this space, or at least Aaron's niche is very specific, with more of the fintech, right? The financial sector. I'm very proud to sit on the advisory board of ATII, for which he is the founder and chairman, as well as the Anti-Trafficking Cryptocurrency Consortium. Aaron utilizes his subject matter expertise in financial crime investigations, regulatory compliance, and open source intelligence, trust and safety in cryptocurrency, forensics, blockchain intelligence, to lead global efforts and influence meaningful advancement in the fight against human trafficking and child sexual exploitation. Aaron, you have had an incredible career really in this space, and I know ATII is really cutting edge, leading in how we can leverage technology through OSINT, and particularly within the financial sector. Could you talk a little bit about how exactly you're leveraging that intelligence and your data analytics to essentially disrupt human trafficking networks? And also, as you talk about that, what are some of the most significant challenges you're facing with regards to access to information, whether it's financial information or other open source information?
Yeah, thank you for the kind introduction as well, Bill. Yeah, open source intelligence is a very unique, and I wouldn't say it's new, but the term and how often it's being used is new. Financial institutions and other gatekeeper organizations that have clients and affect our ecosystem have the potential of facilitating human trafficking and child exploitation. Typically, the way that they investigate and look at this stuff, if they do, is through typologies and use cases of which it happens, in which criminals are constantly evolving and getting better. So typologies are not the only way and the tried and true way of detecting it. And that's where open source intelligence comes in, being able to collect big data, massive amounts of data, and pivot and compare it to um, typologies as well as known offenders and so forth. We're able to glean intelligence that can be utilized in this fight, especially when you're scraping it and comparing it to unique in-house databases, whether it's law enforcement's internal intelligence for cases, or banks or other industry data that sits within their operational infrastructure. When you combine these, our data and other open source data, with internal data, there's a lot of magic and a lot of information that can be found. One of the biggest problems, I think, in implementing this data and doing it is, especially within the financial industry, is that we've got 100 years and decades of doing things the same way. There is evolution, but that evolution typically only happens from a reactive perspective as opposed to a proactive perspective. So, after there's an enforcement action where an institution's fined 250 million, has a lot of negative media and has the potential of a cease and desist disorder, then the budget comes to hire a lot of people and buy technology and stand up a human trafficking department or efforts. So we're really pushing to try to proactively get organizations to think outside of the box and do more for the impact of society and why we're all here today. And different organizations are moving at a different pace, but it's coming. We all see the trajectory around human trafficking and how it's growing, and knowledge of this is growing every year, every day. I'm very hopeful and expecting a lot of change over the next several years in how this is looked at and how companies respond.
Yeah, I appreciate you leading on that. I know, as you mentioned, there's several different organizations and governmental agencies that are really working on this issue. I know you've been doing a lot with the Department of the Treasury to really help move the needle to get them to see where we need to be looking, what type of information we need to be leveraging. And a lot of that is OSINT information. And you all are supporting investigations, being able to collaborate and coordinate and really augment law enforcement efforts. And on that vein, Operation Lightshine and Brian Waite, who's the COO of that, is with us today. And OLS really works to make sure that our law enforcement is equipped with the tools and resources that they need to be able to do the job that we're asking them to do. So it's really great that we've got ATII, who's really working to augment some of those investigations through complex OSINT and data analytics. And then we've got Operation Lightshine, who is really working to make sure law enforcement has advanced forensic technologies and other tools and resources. Brian, who's the COO, is dedicated himself to the mission for over 2 years. He's a husband and father of two, and I know that drives him, that and his faith really drives him in this space. And he comes from the corporate world with over 15 years of experience in marketing and operations, but that really led to his profound calling to make a difference every day. So he is driven. I've been privileged to witness firsthand to see the tangible impact that he and Operation Lightshine are having in combating child exploitation and trafficking, ensuring a brighter future for all children. Brian, thank you for being with us today. And I was hoping that you could share with us a little bit about how OLS is implementing advanced forensic technologies and how that's directly contributed to the recovery and supporting survivors from exiting exploitation.
Absolutely. And thank you, Bill, for the ability to be here in this time. At OLS, we really want to bridge the gap where the government leads off with the funding. The big part of that is the technology piece, and we fully understand that. So for us, it's being able to give our law enforcement partners these essential resources and put as many tools inside their tool belt as we can. And it's really helped in the process of really speeding up the cases and the recovery point of it, because a lot of times they would seize a phone and it just takes a year and months just to break into that phone, see what they're dealing with, or get the people that they're impacting. And now, because of the technology and the tools that we're giving them, we're getting those rates turned around within days instead of months now. So for us, it's just going out, finding the best technology, the best resources, and just giving it to our law enforcement partners through our intercept so that they implement them and save as many people as we can.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we know it's great to have, I can, as a former law enforcement officer myself, you're taxed with cases piling up, dealing with all kinds of other paperwork and other things. And we never had time to go out and shop around for what's the best technology, or what should we be using? How should we be leveraging it? And so I know having you come alongside and support them in their efforts is such an incredible asset. We've talked a lot about the law enforcement component, but I want to turn now to Kristen Vaughn, who comes at technology from a little bit of a different perspective when it comes to this topic that we're talking about today. Kristen is a consultant, a global centurion, has dedicated over 2 decades to addressing human rights and anti-trafficking advocacy work. Drawing from her personal and professional experiences, she's emerged as a powerful advocate, educator, and leader in the anti-trafficking sector. And I can attest to that. I've seen Kristen in action in her advocacy efforts. She does not let down and is very much a fierce advocate in this space. Her progressive approach to advocacy and empowerment shines through her public speaking and event coordination. Her national campaigns against human trafficking reflect her unwavering commitment to making a difference. She's actively contributed to organizations such as Survivor Alliance, Polaris, the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, the Regional Interdisciplinary Collaborative Work to Disrupt Human Trafficking, and Freedom Network. And she is an active and cannot be understated as a valued member of the Virginia Coalition Against Human Trafficking. And so just really thankful to have you here, Kristen, with your very unique perspective, because you're working on technology solutions focused on supporting survivors, which is another aspect of this, right? We need our law enforcement officers to be able to investigate and hold offenders accountable. But we know that three-pronged approach of prevention, prosecution, and protection. And so we've got to be able to support our survivors in that very complicated restorative care process. And given your extensive work on developing technology-based solutions, could you share some examples of innovative technologies that have significantly impacted survivor support and recovery? How do these technologies help navigate the complexities of privacy and consent, but also connecting them to valuable resources, considering the sensitive nature of their experiences?
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Been
Yeah, you're
having
great.
tech issues. Here we are at tech webinar, and I've been having tech issues all day, of course. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm honored to be on this panel with such a superstar team. Yes, I come at it from a different way, as in, so we've got we've got multiple parts. So we've got law enforcement working on anti-trafficking. Typically, that's what it was. And then we had private NGOs come along and say, hey, these are things we can do. Then we have now, and not now, but now more and more, we have survivors getting into, hey, not only can I just go and speak and share my story, but hey, there's a lot more that I can do. So there are a lot of, or not a lot of, but there are more organizations that have been coming along. For example, ATII, and then we've got MVP Task Force and Zero Trafficking and Cyber Night Watch. And we've got these people who are utilizing OSINT skills, which let me just say, I don't think, honestly, and I think Aaron will probably agree with me, I don't think there's ever been a better technology tool other than OSINT when it comes to fighting human trafficking. Because there's so many people have spent so much time building out so many toolboxes and perfecting these skills and finding really creative ways to use. For example, there's one small example for anyone that's not super familiar with OSINT. There are tools you can download that'll tell you the shadow. If there's a picture of a child you're looking for that may have been trafficked, and you can run it through a thing, and it'll show like the shadow, and it'll show the time of where they may be located in the world. Or there was one today I saw on LinkedIn that somebody posted where people are going in and taking pictures of their hotel rooms, and it's like connecting it with possible human traffic or possible sex trafficking instances. So it's building this database, and data is the number one thing that we need. So all of these tools that are working together with law enforcement, with private NGOs, and then I'm come along with some other survivors that like, hey, we're here. We're a lot more than just sharing our stories and being your keynote speaker. We can do the tech stuff. We can do the investigations. We can do a lot of that stuff. So there's a couple of really cool innovative technologies. Just let me make sure I stay on topic. For example, there's a program called Annie Cannons. For anybody that doesn't know about Annie Cannons, they're an amazing organization, and they train survivors. It's like a coding boot camp. It's like a 6-month thing, and they train them in a number of skills. And then we've got different platforms like social Survivor Lines has a messaging platform, but then you've got just at the very simple, I guess the very basis of it, we've got survivors, and this is where I think this would be appropriate for me to talk about our friend Barbara. And so I know Aaron and Bill, both you guys know Barbara Maya, a dear friend of ours. She is a survivor. She passed away unexpectedly in February. She was way ahead of her time on this. About 4 years ago, she came to me and she was like, I had this idea, but you have to swear to God you won't tell anybody. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to tell anybody. And so I didn't. And then I just forgot about it. But she had this idea in, I think, December or November. Laura Lederer, which many of you also know, who founded Global Centurion, was able to get funding for us to create and build out Barbara's idea. It's going to be launched very soon. We've been working very hard on it. And what it is survivor based or survivor vetted, survivor crowdsourced app of 16 different categories. And so, just for example, if you're a victim or a survivor and you're in Boston and you need transportation or you need housing, the app is geospecific. So you can download that app for free. You can use it. You can go, you can put in all the different parameters and your different things that you need, whether male, female, juvenile, whatever, if you're, what your gender, whatever you need. And it's going to give you resources. I think we've got, I don't know how many, so I'm not going to say a number, but we have tons of resources on there that have all been personally vetted, and survivors have been involved at every single level. This decentralizes. So the thing with the hotlines and stuff, like the hotlines are great, but they're more of a lot of those are for crisis situations. And they're very like you can call a hotline, whether it be, the national hotline or a state hotline. And because they're so overloaded and because it's such a complex issue, you may not have immediate assistance right then. You may not have assistance if you need it 5, 10, 15 years removed from trafficking. So this app that we've done, it really just decentralizes that and puts the power of the survivor choices of what you want for your life, whether it be an emergency situation, whether it be 10 years from exiting trafficking and you need to pay your electric bill, whether you need a tattoo removed in 20 years. Like it gives you those options and it protects the privacy and the consent of the survivors and victims because they're dealing directly with those organizations. And again, those organizations are all personally vetted by one of the survivors on the team. So this isn't just like we did a Google search of just put them on there. Like either we've personally dealt with them or we've talked to them. So I think that putting power within the survivor community to be able to do things like that is a really innovative thing. And I'm really excited about it. And so I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. It is very exciting, and I do very much appreciate you honoring Barbara in this moment. She was such a true leader in the space and is very dearly missed. I love that you were able to keep working on her behalf. And it's so amazing because you all have different perspectives and very operational perspectives, if you will. But very pleased to have Stacy Peter with us, who really has that overarching view of all things as it pertains to technology and information systems as we bring this together. Stacy is the Citibank Callaway Fellow and Professor of Management Information Systems at Wake Forest University School of Business. And I had the pleasure of meeting Stacy just this past January at a conference in Charlotte, North Carolina. And gosh, it was this instant connection with all the work that she's doing and the space that we're moving in, and just was so incredibly impressed by her. Much of her research focuses on the impacts of information systems on individuals, organizations, and society, which I think is so incredibly important because this is where we can just be putting solutions together and throwing them out there. But unless we really understand the impact, right, and the intersectionality of these different solutions, sometimes we could be creating more harm. Sometimes the solution may not do anything at all if it's not integrating well within the system that it's supposed to be. She's had a focus on how information technology and data can be used to counter human trafficking. Her research on human trafficking and illicit activity has been funded by the National Science Foundation. And as a scholar, she's published over 100 publications and has been recognized as among the top 2%. Listen to the top 2% of cited scientists worldwide in 2019 to 2023. Truly an expert in this space. And Stacey, I wonder if you could comment a little bit, given your research on how information technology can both positively and negatively impact society. Could you share some of your insights on the most effective ways that technology has been used to disrupt human trafficking networks? And also, has there been any unintended negative impacts that have arisen from that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think there are some really creative and innovative ways that people have used technology to meet different goals associated with human trafficking. There's been a lot of different apps that have been created to really help with awareness and prevention, especially in the labor trafficking arena. So, for example, the United States Department of Labor has the Sweat and Toil app that you can download and get data and resources to learn more about child labor and forced labor within supply chains. Or there's apps that you can download like Boycott, and you can use your phone and scan a barcode and find out if that particular product is flagged in different types of campaigns. So if you're concerned with forced labor or trafficking and things like that. So these are tools that can be great for consumers who want to have a way to try to make a difference, find their way to not contribute to the problem. But just because we have an app, it doesn't mean people are going to download it. It doesn't mean that people are going to use it. We've been talking about data already. It's only as good as the data that goes into the tool. We all have biases that we bring to the table. So there can be biases that come with the data or the tool itself. And so there are limitations of how far they can go, but it is a good way to allow the general public to be educated and learn more about the effort. There's other technologies too that are really creative that some law enforcement agencies and nonprofits have partnered with together using conversational AI and chatbots as a way to try to address demand. Setting up a fake advertisement, a commercial sex ad online, maybe with a minor or an adult or a vulnerable population. The buyer sends a message to set up a date, and it responds with basically a message and conversing with them for a period of time, but then saying, by the way, this is being monitored by a law enforcement agency or by a group, and the penalty for meeting up and engaging in this activity is X, Y, and Z. So it's a kind of a creative way to try to address demand before it happens. And so there's been some creativity there. But getting to this unintended consequence, I would say the part that worries me, I think there's sometimes things that are done with really good intentions, but there's downstream consequences. So a lot of NGOs, a lot of academics have been working to scrape commercial sex ads to look for patterns of trafficking, right? To look for, identify or prioritize cases for law enforcement, or to identify patterns that we can study and understand through research to try to address the problem. But when we have all this data and we're downloading images and text, there are people behind, real people, real victims behind those images. And they're being stored. And we don't know how many times those are being stored. Not only are they on the internet, but now they're being stored on all of these different servers by various nonprofits or academics worldwide. Maybe that commercial marketplace is willing to honor a takedown request, and that photo is removed from their website, but it's not getting removed from every other organization or individual that's ever downloaded that image. And so I think we have to think about, even when we're trying to use data and technology for good reasons, we need to think about the dignity of the people behind this data. It's not a character or a token, it's a person that's behind it. And we need to have more survivor-informed policies or ways that we think about these types of approaches. Again, great intentions in mind, but I think that's an example to me of one of those unintended consequences.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think the more that we can put that academic approach behind it, right? Because I think, and people are free to disagree with me as always, but I think those that are in those operational roles oftentimes just get so focused on trying to get to whatever it is they're trying to do. And they don't have that opportunity to think about what are those unintended consequences. And Stacey, when you come along and your colleagues throughout the space are able to provide some additional insights into that and to call for things like, I think that's spot on. I think Kristen would probably agree with us that we need more survivors at the table to be able to be speaking into these, to make sure that the policies are being responsive and respectful, right, to the very real people that are being impacted by these crimes. And to that note, it's not so many different people play a role in this fight. And I know, Aaron, you at ATII have been working very diligently about bridging the gap between public and private partnerships, bringing different entities together, making the business case to financial institutions as to why they should be engaged in this fight. And so I wonder if you could share with us a little bit today about the role of those public-private partnerships in enhancing the fight against human trafficking. How does collaboration with those financial institutions and technology companies and NGOs like yourself and the government, when necessary, advance the overall objectives of our goal to eradicate human trafficking?
Yeah, it's private-public partnerships are so important in this fight. We work directly with law enforcement on different child exploitation and human trafficking cases, providing support, training on some of those sophisticated investigation techniques, from dark web intelligence to OSINT to crypto asset tracing. When it comes to engaging with technology companies have developed very expensive tools and products that they want to sell to the industry, whether it is the private sector or the public sector. And we've been fortunate enough, and so have other NGOs, I'm sure Operation Lightshine and others have received and been able to use as a nonprofit some of these tools to help in their investigations and to assist law enforcement and so forth. And that's so important because not all NGOs out there are developing their own tech and doing their own data processing and enriching. So these public-private partnerships are very meaningful. Another way we partner with in the technology space is our mission. A big part of our mission is working in the financial sector. And how many banks, how many credit unions, how many currency organizations are there in the world? There's so many, right? It's very difficult to tackle one at a time. We definitely work with one-off ones where we're making an impact, but at the end of the day, when we're able to partner with technology companies that have risk platforms or data products or things that they're offering to their hundreds or thousands of end user customers that are banks, then that allows our NGO data to spread far and wide in the financial sector and in the commercial ecosystem, to be able to allow these companies and banks and to get access to the data to find this risk and to try to work with law enforcement or file reports to find this within their organization. There's a lot of ways that private public partnerships are very useful, and that's some of the ways we engage. But I know we don't have too much time, and you've got more questions, so I'll keep it brief with that.
No, that's perfect, Aaron. Thank you for that. It's really important. And I want to be the first one to acknowledge saying the words collaboration, partnership, it's much easier to say them than to put that into practice, right? And so having organizations like yourself and also Operation Lightshine come alongside these different groups and work with them. And Brian, I dare say you have one of the most difficult groups to work with, and that is law enforcement, right? I say that respectfully as a former law enforcement officer. But you're doing great things. You are setting up intercept task forces all across the country where you are bringing law enforcement, NGOs, technology partners together, oftentimes working in the same space, which is just, believe it or not, that's completely revolutionary, right, for these types of operations. Could you talk a little bit about the intercept task forces, how you're working to foster collaboration, and how you're leveraging technology to do some of that work?
Absolutely. As you said, it's very groundbreaking, which is very sad to think about in this fight, but it's us getting all these detectives and investigators out of these private silos, right? Out of their corners in their offices. And because a lot of these people aren't solely focused on this issue, right, of exploitation or trafficking. They have to work SVU cases and a bunch of other things. So our goal through Intercept is to get all these leading detectives, investigators, get them up, get them together, get them in one room, shoulder to shoulder, solely focused on this fight. And by doing that, we can give them the technology and everything they need to continue to advance in it, because a lot of them are so understaffed and so under-resourced. It's really bringing everybody together in a collaborative approach to really tackle this thing and actually make a true impact.
Yeah. I think it is just again, I don't mean to be overly repetitive, but I just want individuals to recognize how truly incredible it is when we start to bring them together and put them in the same room, breaking down those barriers. I think technology helps us do that, right? It helps us connect in ways that we never thought that we would be able to connect before. It's helping us do things that we never thought that we would ever be able to do. One of the areas that we've talked about for years is survivor support services and making sure that survivors are able to access various services. And Christian, you've talked a little bit about what some of the practical solutions are that I know I'm personally excited about. Monitoring the chat, I know several of the people here today are very excited about. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the legal or policy hurdles that are really impeding the effective use of technology in supporting survivors in a very appropriate way.
Okay. You guys think that law enforcement and private NGOs, it's revolutionary for them to be in a room together. Try law enforcement and survivors who have been fighting against law enforcement our entire since we were victims. And yeah, no, it's really cool to see a lot of the partnerships when people are willing to, hey, let's push our sleeves up, let's get the work done. So that's really cool. But I think what to go to what Aaron said earlier, I think that it's always going to be the fact that laws and policies will always happen slower than technology. They'll always, technology is moving at a rapid pace, and so that where that puts us is law and policies that are, it takes forever to get enacted. When you've got the traffickers who don't have to follow such things, and they can just out here do whatever while we're sitting here with our hands tied. So a lot of the like when there's so many, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I made some notes, but can you repeat the question for me?
Yeah, so just what are those hurdles, right? The
Oh,
legal,
yes,
the policy hurdles
yeah.
that really impede the effective use of technology.
Okay, so policy hurdles when it comes to survivors and victims. So there's a lot of different ones. So first of all, you've got, okay, just small example. I was at an international security conference a couple weeks ago in Vegas, and there was a huge conversation around there are security companies that have tech, that have drones, that have cameras, that have, for example, Ring doorbells that they want to give to law enforcement, just outright give to them or donate to them, but it's illegal for them to take them. So there's, and that's just one simple policy that could be changed. I know it's in Texas, it's a big problem. There was some, there's an organization that tried to donate 100 drones to use at the border to help fight child sex trafficking at the border and labor trafficking, and they couldn't even accept them. I'm like, why? And they said, because that's an actual law, it's a policy. And then when it comes to survivors, they're, because of, and this is could be a whole other webinar, so I'll keep this short. There's a whole thing about just even criminal record relief. So for survivors to step into the space of technology to where we could even at the very bottom level just even consult with an organization, because of some of our criminal records, we're unable to do stuff like that. We're unable to even work with organizations, and I think that survivors need to be involved at every single level. So I think that is just even looking at criminal record relief and national vacatur for survivors would 100% help to be just another way that survivors could, that if technology could be able to be used to help survivors. Because if we're not involved, then, and I just one thing, and I'll say about Aaron, he's always, ever since I've known him, has always involved survivors at every level. And there's multiple times that I'll be like, hey, I don't agree with something, let's talk about it. And he's welcome to have a conversation. Organizations that are willing to do that and just help, like, okay, this may not be a great policy, but there are things that we can do to help get you to this place or to help figure it out. Just having those things in place, because I don't think the policies, I don't know if you guys have met Congress, but they're not doing anything anytime soon. So that's why it's really important for NGOs to be able to come alongside and work with law enforcement and survivors, because I feel like we're like the dream team that's like getting stuff done.
Well, I really appreciate you highlighting there has been challenges in investigation. Some of that is law enforcement interaction with survivors. Some of it is training around anybody that's really on the front lines. And so that kind of leads to where I want to go next. And that is, Stacey, there's so many pieces of research that you have pioneered that are just incredible, right? And so I was thinking through them, which one do I really want to pull out and talk about? But there's one that really fascinates me, and I think it just is really interesting, and that is this concept of gamification, right? And how can you've done some research on this. Can you talk a little bit about how you envision using gamification, using the technology of gaming to address some of these issues that Kristen's talked about, or any of the other issues that you see in the human trafficking space?
Yeah, I think there's some really fascinating ways that we can think about how to leverage technology in creative ways. And I think one thing that's important to distinguish is that there are some differences between gaming and gamification, right? So when we think of gaming, this is something that's really done for the purpose of enjoyment, right? We're doing it for fun. Whether it's a board game, whether it's a computer game or an online game, we are doing the task because we want to experience pleasure as a result of it. Now, gamification is taking a task that we need to get some task outcome. There needs to be a productivity element to it, and we're trying to make it more enjoyable. And so I think there's some things that recognizing that there's some differences between gaming and gamification, it might affect the way that we think about these elements a bit differently. So with online gaming, there is a category that's serious games, right? We have fun, but we learn along the way, like edutainment kind of approach. So we can also think about online games and gaming as a medium, like we do with books or novels or documentaries. So you can really think about this as a way to better educate individuals about human trafficking, create more education and awareness, understanding kind of what those narratives and lived experiences might be like to develop empathy among the general population. So it could really have a powerful way, especially if it's done the right way with the right partnerships with survivor informed, really thinking through the mechanics of what is it that we want to educate and help people learn along the way, and how do we do this in a respectful and appropriate way that could be a powerful way to help individuals really recognize what is human trafficking and address a lot of the misconceptions associated with it. There's also a lot of potential with therapeutic gaming as another form of serious game. So Kristen talked about helping the survivors recover and dealing with that transition from this notion of victim to surviving to thriving. And gaming could be an element that can support some of those ways. Again, designed with the right expertise in the right way, it might have some elements of fun and enjoyment, but it also has a serious purpose as well. Now with gamification, this is where we take a task that we normally do for productivity purposes and trying to make it more fun. And this is where I would say caution is important. Typically we use for gamification things like points, or you get a badge, or look at my name on a leaderboard. And I can think of really cringy ways of applying gamification of look how many people I saved today, or look how many reports I generate. That's horrible. That's not the way that we want to enact those types of strategies. So I really think it's important with gamification that you think carefully about, okay, what's the task that you're trying to make more enjoyable? Does that task need to be more enjoyable? Or maybe it's just we need to deal with the heaviness of the task. And I think there's a line that has to be explored there that I don't know that I have all the answers to that yet, but I think there's a lot of really interesting questions in this space.
And I love that you're exploring that, right? Because I think that we've talked about the very sort of practical day-to-day operational components of technology, but there's also the training, right? Or prevention as well. So thinking about how do we train our frontline professionals, but also thinking about how do we train our vulnerable populations, right? And get the information out to them in a more meaningful way. I know we're running out of time. I'm going to ask one more question of each of you, and I'm going to give you a second to think about it. And the question is going to be, assuming that there was a member of Congress on this call today, and there are some staffers that are listening in, we thank you for joining us. What is it that you would tell Congress that they need to do? What is the one bill, preferably as it relates to technology, that you would like to see them enact that's going to help? It could be in the prevention space, it could be in the protection space, or in the prosecution space. You cannot cheat and say give more money. So we all know that we need more money. So that is not a valid answer. But while you think about those for a second, I just want to wrap this up and say we've talked about these various different uses of technology today. One area we didn't get to delve in as much as I'd like to, and that is just the massive amount of data that's being collected in this space, that could be collected in this space, that could really leverage technology, but also leverage resources in a more meaningful way. We know that so many people are constantly being asked to do more with less, and knowing where we can direct those resources based on the data, I think is really critical. So for those of you that are in nonprofit organizations, are working on the front lines, I'd encourage you to be thinking about how you're collecting your data and how you're sharing that with other organizations, and maybe getting involved in consortiums where we're and don't laugh at me for my terminology here, but creating universal terms or methods of collecting data so that we can start to piece the different parts of the puzzle together. But with that, as we think about data and we move forward, we think about technology. Aaron, what do you want Congress to do?
I'm going to take the time here with this question to plug something that we're doing that's related, because I know that everybody else here are going to mention some of the other bills that are in action or ideas. One of the interesting things that we're working with on the Hill is, and I'm going to stick with the financial theme since I've been put into that box so far, but FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, they do the regulations that all the banks and financial institutions have to follow. They've been issuing guidance and advisory on human trafficking for over 10 years now. And although the industry is more aware and there's more proactive stuff being done, we can all agree that we're at a place where, very few organizations, institutions are being held accountable for this. So one of the things that we've been working on is saying, hey, since COVID, FinCEN has just been starting to talk about online child sexual exploitation and the fact that following COVID, there's a lot more online activity with people camming and whatnot, and children being involved. Instead of going this same trajectory, this 10 plus year trajectory of slowly giving a little bit of guidance, but not holding any teeth to it. For those that don't know, FinCEN has one person employed full-time investigating human trafficking suspicious activity reports within the whole financial sector, in which millions and millions of SARS, suspicious activity reports, are filed a day. ATI has been working to get financing passed to stand up a online child sexual exploitation unit within FinCEN to start investigating online child sexual exploitation being facilitated through finance today, as opposed to waiting 10 years and doing this. It has bipartisan support. It's been entered into congressional record, so it's something that's going to keep coming up and being spoken about. I don't know when it will happen, but I'm hoping it does.
Excellent, thank you. Brian, I know you need more money for your task forces, but other than that, what do you want Congress to do?
I got to get in the same vein of the child exploitation side of it. We actually had the opportunity to represent in front of the congressional hearing with Tim Tebow and the TTF group and the ICAC commanders for this exact topic. And we were going in to ask for the funding for the identification of children that are unidentified in this space. We really feel that the funding is a giant issue. Organizations like OLS should not have to exist. That's just point an example. We should not be here. Our goal is to work ourselves out of a job, but we have to stand that gap for the financial side of it. So passing the bill, I want to say it's a PROTECT Act bill, that really goes after the funding to this fight, not just to us as an organization, because it's bigger than us. It's not us against every other NGO. It's all of us trying to come together in a collaborative approach to save one more kid. If we can save one more kid today, we're making a difference. It's not about us. It's not about pointing fingers. It's literally about everybody coming together to get as many resources as possible to save as many kids as we can. So for us, it would be that bill to increase the funding to protect our kids and to find kids, because it's drastically low. So
Excellent. Kristen?
Yeah, I had to look up the numbers. I've been so entrenched in Virginia bills and policy, but there's two specifically. One is, and I think they both actually passed the House. One's HR 443, and it basically requires the Department of Labor to provide training and education to its employees on how to effectively detect, not only to detect, but to assist law enforcement in detecting human trafficking. I think that awareness is a word that is trite and overused, and we're past that. Prevention needs to be, yes, if you're not aware of trafficking in 2024, okay, but we can work on that. But prevention at a young age, and then also the protection, the identification, and the immediate intervention. The other one is HR 623, which is very similar to that, but it actually has to do with schools and healthcare. So it's students, teachers, school personnel on how to better understand, recognize, and prevent, and that's the key word, respond to human trafficking and exploitation of children and youth. So those two would be my main ones. And then of course the other one is funding. We need funding. We need funding. Everybody needs funding. And there's so much money that has been thrown at this problem. And look where we are. Like there are organizations that get hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, but nobody can really tell us what they do. There needs to be some more judicial oversight. Absolutely. There needs to be some more there just needs to be the people that are doing the work, like Operation Light Shine and Aaron and organizations like We Fight Monsters, the people that are doing the work that can show you metrics and that are out here. We don't do this to get rich. We don't do this because it's fun. I would dare say that most people on, or probably everybody on this panel right now, does not accept a salary for most of what we do. We may accept some salary, but for the majority of part, we do this because we love it and there's nothing else we could do. So there just needs to be funding for organizations that are actually doing the work, not organizations that just have celebrities and galas and all of that. So that's my soapbox.
I appreciate that. I think, and I'll just say, I think I agree with you. I think the funding needs to be restructured, but I think technology plays into that, right? Because the more data that we can collect around just the accountability component, but also the needs, right? And we can tie data into that. That's something we can put in front of them that it's undeniable. Right.
And when
They
you can
look at
show
the
them that,
numbers.
yeah, when you can show them the data
Exactly.
and they can see the numbers instead of just being like, oh, let me just tell you about this person I saved, or look at my LinkedIn posts about all these doors I kicked in. But you can be like, no, look, out of this much money and this many people that we tried to help, these are our metrics. Being able to do that is huge.
Yes. Stacy, bring us home. What do you want Congress to do?
I think all of these things are so relevant. And I think a big thing that I just would like to see of Congress is that they're actually thinking about things that are going to help people and help this issue rather than grandstanding around issues and dealing with their pet projects, right? So there are really good bills. Aaron, Brian, Kristen, you've all talked about some really important issues that need to be discussed. And we need accountability, as Kristen talked about. We need the resources that are provided. We need to avoid them becoming talking points and ways to get elected, and actually about doing the work. And I would say the things that I am paying a lot of attention to is not just the bills, but what's happening in the courts with things like Section 230 and how that affects how technology companies interact and what that means in terms of data, and how these organizations end up becoming sometimes complicit in the supply chain of human trafficking as a result. And I think we need to make sure that those bills that are written are actually good bills that can stand up in the courts and have some teeth to them.
Yeah, I think it's a tall order to ask Congress to stop grandstanding, and we'll just leave it at that. But I very much appreciate your comments. I just want to say a very sincere thank you. It's such an incredible topic. I know we probably could have went all day on this topic alone, but really appreciate the four of you, true experts in your spaces, for taking the time out of your busy day to share your perspectives, your insight, the work that you are doing and have done. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. We are here to support you. Join us next month. Next month, we're going to be talking about prevention and why we don't have prevention education in our schools all across America. So we'll see you next month. Thanks, everyone.